the objective of today is to help women secure seats in the boardroom. So whether that is, you're looking to secure a seat now, you're in, the process of it, you're looking out towards your what's next, and you want to serve in the future. Wherever you might be in your path, we are so glad that you are here. A record number of women are looking for board seats. And here's some perspective for you. So I am a member of Chief, as I know many of you on our call today are as well. In Chief, out of the 27 groups in the professional interest category, board services is the largest group with 10,000 women who have signed up in board services. That's more than half of the women in career services or career transition at 4,400. So 10,000 women in Chief looking for board opportunities. So why do women want to serve on boards? Well, there are a few reasons. One, to apply the decades of leadership and executive and life successes in a meaningful way, to affect change, to contribute and give back, to remain relevant and deepen our professional legacies, and then to use our skills, whether that's risk management, operations, strategy, finance, marketing, governance, whatever it might be, we want to be able to apply our skills. And today, we're going to help our Women's Forum community sift through what's fact from what is fiction, because we have a rock star panel with us. So that's talking about pros and cons of board credentials, retaining a recruit. Do you retain a recruiter? What documents do you need? Board CV, board bio. What do you need to build a board network? And so much more. So we are so glad that you are with us today, and know that this is going to be valuable to everybody in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, we just want more women at the table and in the rooms where those important conversations are had and decisions are made. I think that's really the essence of our Women's Forum, but it's also the essence of our firm, as 2 of our 3 founders are women, 70% of our colleagues are women. And actually, it's also an important topic of the firm, given the nature of our work. When we act as a fiduciary investment advisor and asset manager for governing bodies that oversee retirement plans, endowments, foundations, operating or reserve accounts, as their fiduciary advisor, we help boards, committees, leadership govern with excellence. So, what does govern with excellence mean? That's really just going beyond the basics of selecting investments and monitoring them, but it's really establishing decision-making frameworks, processes, understanding all aspects of enterprise risk so that we can help clients get better results and make better investment decisions and fully document those. That's really the essence of great governance also, is fully documenting your prudent decisions. We take that same mindset when we work with individuals and families too. It's really focusing on more than just the investments, but that framework for success to help our clients achieve their life and legacy goals. An essential element of governance is accountability, and that governance mindset, we think, sets us apart and really helps our clients then achieve better outcomes. And if you want to learn more about how we help institutions or individuals, please feel free to reach out to either me or Nancy to talk about that. So I've said governance 5 times. You're going to hear it 10, 15, 20 more times. So we're going to jump into our program because our panelists, have quite a lot of expertise in governance and also know how important it is in their role as on boards. So I know you received the bios that really showcased Sally's, Heather, and Suzanne's expertise here. So I'm not going to repeat any of that, but I'm just going to jump in and kind of start the first conversation. The 3 of you have been involved in the board world, whether it's recruiting or vetting people on boards. being on important committees, sitting on different types of nonprofit, public, private boards. What do you see as the current trends in how boards are evolving, and what type of candidates are they looking for? Maybe Heather, you can start us out here.
Sorry, lost my mute button there all of a sudden. Hi, good day, everyone. Good day or good evening. Maybe just a minute of context about where my remarks are coming from. Bear in mind that my best experience is placing directors on corporate boards. And a little context about my firm, TrueStar. We're a women-owned and operated search firm that exclusively focuses at the board level. Our clients touch all industry sectors and range from the Fortune 500 to Series A companies. We proudly placed our 250th corporate director in January, a milestone we felt was pretty important. 94% of our placements inception to date have been traditionally underrepresented candidates, and around 88% have been women. So that's from whence I speak to you about what we're seeing about trends and so forth. Let me start with a little bit of a sobering truth. Is that the journey to making your way onto a corporate board is incredibly opaque. These decisions happen behind closed doors. And this is further complicated by the fact that virtually no two companies approach director recruitment in the same manner. I'm in the business all day, every day, and it never ceases to amaze me the number of different ways in which a board search gets executed. And I can share some examples and suggestions as the discussions unfold. But for now, let me just leave you with some more positive thoughts about how things are evolving and changing. Diversification is finally real. Specifically, boards are appointing more women, more people of color, more backgrounds beyond CEOs and CFOs, though make no mistake, those are still extremely popular candidates for board roles. Boards are reporting younger executives, and in board terms, that means anyone below 60. I know it sounds incredible, but it's true. And the net result of this is that there are more first-time board directors making their way onto boards. That elusive first board seat is a little less elusive now. The penny has finally dropped that if you want to diversify, you have to broaden the pool. And those first-time directors need support, of course, but do beautifully if they've been well selected for the role. So let me leave it there, and we can expand on all these points later as desired.
Thanks. Hey, Suzanne, how about you here jumping in?
Well, first of all, I'm pleased to see so many women here today interested in moving their careers into board service. So hooray for you, and hopefully we'll give you some nice nuggets to walk away with. And I don't know that Nancy or Barbara mentioned this at the top of our discussion, but we will be sending out a follow-up. We'll bring you some resources in that follow-up. So hopefully we'll give you lots of things that you can act on starting today. I'll give you a little of my perspective and my background, where I come from. I'm a former chief marketing officer in the technology space, a former public company CEO, and now I'm what I call semi-retired. And I've got some friends on the phone here that will point at me and say, no, you're not retired. I currently serve on several boards. And so I'll bring some additional color to what Heather was saying. Gender diversity in the boardroom is absolutely here. It's definitely a focus. 5 years ago, I would have told you that 18% of board seats in the Fortune 1000 and the Russell 3000 were comprised of women. Today, we're cresting 28%. So it's a reality that there is a better gender mix in the boardroom. Only 6% of those women are Black. So we're still working on the other diversity factors. We're not there yet. Also interesting, a statistic here to share is that 82% of the seats that women have taken over the past year were net new seats. So the way that diversity is being created is that additional board seats are being opened. It doesn't mean that a white man gave up his seat for a woman coming on the board. So the time it's going to take us to continue to to change these diversity numbers is still, it's a significant cut that we still have to make, but it's happening. I will also say, further to Heather's point, you don't have to be a former CEO in order to get a board seat. You don't have to have a deep finance background. Diversity is also coming in backgrounds on board seats. And so what I'm finding, and this is a NACD experience that I have, I sit on the National Association of Corporate Directors board for my local chapter. And what we're finding is that people are being picked up because they have specialty skills in ESG and human capital management. Better financial oversight. I mean, the Silicon Valley Bank implosion really gave us all a reason to look further at long-term treasury functions, and the board should be involved in this. And having that deep understanding of treasury is important and could make you a very attractive candidate. Cybersecurity, quantum computing, the future of AI in business. All of these things are things that are now topics in the boardroom, where before it was, what are this quarter's financials and what is the outlook for next quarter's financials? It is no longer that narrow. And it's incumbent on boards to look broadly at all of the factors that the business needs to consider for its future state. So this is an opportunity for every one of you. The myth we want to bust here is that you don't have to be a CEO, you don't have to be a finance person to bring great value to the boardroom. So the trend is that it is a skills-based qualification that you can bring to the table to make you attractive. So we'll talk lots more about all of those things, and I'll pass it back over to Barbara and Nancy.
I'm going to have Sally jump in. Suzanne just mentioned about the importance of skills, and some of these recent issues have, especially the signature, underscored skills. Can you talk a little bit about a skills matrix that a board typically uses and the role that plays in and who the next board member might be?
Sure. So nice to be here with everyone. I will give the perspective that I'm coming from as well. Before I answer the question, I'll call myself in phase 2 of my career. I don't know how many phases there'll be, but we'll call this phase 2. And I used to be a public company CEO and private equity backed company CEO. And then when I departed from operating roles, I started the board journey myself. So today I'm on 3 public company boards, 1 private company board, and I recently joined a bank board, even after the SVB announcement as well. So what a time to join. And on all of those boards, I serve in various capacities: chair, nom-gov chair, com committee chair, and usually on the board, I'm on the audit committee, although I've never chaired one. So, so when you ask about the skills matrix, and especially from the lens of chairing nom-gov, that's nominating governance committee, oftentimes it is in that committee that we are not only looking at the current skill set of our current board members, and we're taking an inventory of that through a set of questions and a matrix that we develop in terms of the current skills that we need now, but then we're also looking to the future and the strategy of the company, and how do our skills align with the future strategy of the company, and do we have those skills to support the management team in the execution of the strategy as well, and be good thought partners for them. So every year we're doing this exercise, and we're doing, on the boards that I'm on, we don't do a 360 assessment, although many boards do a 360 assessment of each other. We self-assess, and we could have a whole conversation about that, but I'll just leave it for what it is now. And then we look to then the future strategy of the company to identify gaps, and then sometimes have the tough conversations with directors that maybe it isn't right for them to continue to serve in the upcoming year, because the other thing that many of the boards that I'm on as well, we don't believe that even the path to diversity or increasing skill sets is just to add to the board. So we are looking at keeping the board the same size, but looking critically at the skills that we need, having tough conversations with some directors as well, and then adding those skill sets to the board as we look to the future strategy. And within those current trends, we're finding that, granted, I'm a former CEO, but my background's in sales, marketing, product development are the line functions that I built my career in. We're looking beyond that C-suite and saying, what are some line leaders that could add to our board, and not looking only at the typical C-suite as well.
Can I add some comments to that? I love it that you are using this skills matrix to find your gaps, and then to use those gaps to define who it is you need on your board. For all of you that may get to the interview process, keep in mind that this skills matrix sits on the other side of the table. You can't ask for the skills matrix, right? You can't say, will you share it with me so that you can take a look? But you can certainly ask the question. And I would plant this seed with you. Please, when you're doing your interview, ask the question about what the skills are that the board is looking for. You were chosen for a reason to come in as a candidate, but what are the skills that your board is seeking today and tomorrow? To Sally's point, if a good skills matrix is going to have a future view to it as well, this gives you a couple of opportunities. Number one, you can understand how you're a fit, and then it's the opportunity for you in the interview process to talk about how it is you are a fit. Second, it tells you how the board thinks about their current skill set. And lastly, what that does is it tells you whether or not they're forward thinking enough about the company. You are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. And so you want to listen and understand what they're saying about the future skill sets they need, because it's an indicator of where the business is going, or it's an indicator that the board isn't thinking about where the business is going. So it's very, I think, telling to understand what's in that board matrix and where they feel their gaps are.
May I jump in?
Oh, go ahead,
Sally.
Heather.
No, I just had one tiny point and then one, I think, expanding point, because I love so much what both of you said. One tiny point is that if it's a public company, it could be, it's quite likely, in fact, that the skills matrix is disclosed in the proxy. So you may get a sneak peek of it, at it prior to that in the instance of a public company. I was just going to give like a little bit of a counterbalancing to this notion of skills, experience, expertise. And that is, while it is obviously important and going to be your calling card for a board opportunity, there's also a notion that's dancing in my mind that says it's fine to be expert and deeply skilled in a relevant area, but they're also looking at you to be a full board contributor, and that boards rarely have room for a one-trick pony. In other words, somebody who only is really prepared to speak up and contribute when the agenda items point to something that's in their sweet spot. So think about all the things as you go into an interview situation that boards think about, talk about, worry about, make decisions about. And sure, you're going to have your strongest points to make a contribution, but don't let. If finance is a blind spot for you, that's something you should be addressing right now, because there's going to be a point at which you're going to be expected to contribute to the financial discussions, to really understand the financial statements when they're rolled out by the audit committee and when the processes and controls are debated and discussed. So, that kind of thing. Think about the full board contribution that you can make in addition to the expertise you bring.
Yeah. And I would add along those lines is that sometimes not only in the proxy for a public company, you might see the skills matrix. One, if everybody checks every box, that's a little bit of a warning sign. And the other side of that as well, and Heather, you might see this in a lot of your work, is that sometimes the board's specification, what they're looking for, is drawing strong hints to what they need in a future facing board member as well. But to reiterate, really drawing upon all of your experiences throughout your career, because boards rarely have room for that one trick pony, and you are really looked upon to contribute to the dialogue and, quite frankly, vote on matters as well.
so
I
many.
have a super funny anecdote about box checking on skills matrices, if I could just share it, because I think it'll resonate and also bring up a topic we want to talk about. A candidate of mine said the other day, she looked at the skills matrix as it was about to be published in her company Proxy, where she serves on the board, a public company. And 6 people on the board had checked cybersecurity expertise. And she said, I wasn't one of them. And trust me, I'm the only one in that boardroom who knows the first thing about cybersecurity. And even I didn't feel qualified to check that box on the matrix because my expertise is not deep enough. So it's a problem.
Well, those are all so many great points. And Suzanne, I'm just going to go back to something that you had mentioned about being sure that the mindset of we're interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing us, and the power of asking and the importance of asking. So I'm going to ask you to just share your thoughts on if, in addition to those, if someone were to come to you and express a strong interest in joining a board, what other suggestions would you make? What are some of those essential steps that you either went through or you see women going through today?
Sure. I'll give you my 4-point sort of primer here. So number 1, start now while you're in the C-suite is the place that I would begin. If you believe that you have a future in board service, it's great for you to engage your C-suite executives, your CEO, and say, I believe I have a future in board work. What can I be doing today to engage more with the committees that we're supporting here in this organization, to support the board, to spend more time in the boardroom, bringing my value forward? And what it does is it plants the seed that you're thinking about your personal progression. You always want your executive team to know that you're in a growth mode, right? What that does, though, is it gives you then the privilege and the right to then go out and look for other organizations that you can go serve. And it opens the door to conversations with people in your organization that may be helpers for you. So you can now start talking to the auditors, and you can start talking about outside counsel about this desire that you have to go and serve other organizations. This is where your networking starts to grow, because I will tell you, my experiences, the network that I had as a chief marketing officer did nothing to help me find my first board seat. It was actually my outside counsel from the organization that I was in that told me about an opportunity, recommended that they interview me for a board position. And that's how I got my first seat. It was through a legal connection that knew that a slate was opening at another organization and that my skill set might be a fit. So let everyone know that this is something that you have in mind. Step number 1. Step number 2, get your vocabulary straight. Because the way that you talk about business, if you're a chief marketing officer, if you're an operator, whatever, is different than the way that the board talks about things in the boardroom. It is very governance oriented. I think that's now the 8th time that we've said governance, right? Very governance oriented, very risk management oriented, very growth oriented in a measurable way. And so there's vocabulary that you need to learn so that when you're in those interviews and you begin to pitch organizations that you might be a fit, you need to talk their language. Everything you've done in your history likely has a tie to the boardroom, but it might be spun in a slightly different way. So I'll give you an example. If you're an operator and you helped with an M&A deal, that's interesting to a board that might be interviewing you if it's an acquisitive company, right? But you don't talk about how your daily operations changed when you integrated that company that you are merging with. You're going to talk instead about the return on investment for that merger. You're going to talk about the way that you integrated them quickly and you saw that return on that investment. The board wants to know that the investments that they're making make sense. And if you are a financially oriented person and can talk about those numbers, that's a great way of setting an example. So learn the vocabulary, and you can do that by networking, certainly, but by joining groups like this one that bring you great programming that teach you about that language. But there's dozens of other organizations out there. National Association of Corporate Directors, Director Diversity Initiative. We'll send you some of these in the follow-up that we'll send over to you. All of these organizations are designed to give you the underpinning that you need to articulate your story. So that's number 2, know your vocabulary and button yourself up so that you're ready to have the talk. Number 3, button up your credentials. So there's a whole exercise of re-articulating yourself and your skill set so that it aligns to a person that Sally was talking about, which is your Nom and Gov chair. This is the person that's going to ultimately be driving the search for a new board director. They're going to want to understand how you fit. Sometimes it's hard to make the leap from being in the operator mode to being packaging yourself and being in the board oriented mode. And you can use a third party to help you with this. There are folks that their whole career is specifically designed around helping folks like you re-articulate your story so that you look great on paper. I've got one of them on the phone with us today, Deb Wheatman. You should put your contact information in chat so people know who you are. I went to Deb. She talks with every single one of my people in my network that are looking for help. I send them all to Deb. And what she'll do is she'll take your skills and then she'll help you spin it in such a way that you are using that language appropriately. So get your board resume together. And I'm going to go back to Heather on this one. Not a board bio, but a board resume, because these people want to know your entire history, right? They don't want to know just the brushstroke. They want to know the depth of what it is you've done. So button that up, make sure it aligns with your LinkedIn, get yourself put together. Third parties can absolutely help you do that. And then the last one, number 4, network like crazy. Again, it's probably not the network you have, but the network you need. These should be people that influence or are aware of an open slate at companies. So think about your auditors, think about your lawyers, the candlestick maker. Think about the people in your network that know when board seats become open and make sure they know that you are interested and would like to be kept in mind for those types of options.
Oh, Heather? that was awesome. And I'm going to go to Heather and see if Heather and Sally want to jump in as well.
Sorry, I'm in New York City and the sirens are so crazy. And maybe you guys can't hear them, but I keep muting myself so that you're not subjected to this firestorm down below me. So I and TrueStar has fairly strong opinions about the value of a board bio. And that is that, I've really never seen a bio, no matter how well worded, that is anything close to a substitute for a detailed accounting of your career, i.e. your CV. And of course, no substitute for recommendations from people who've seen you in action and can speak as to your effectiveness. So this is very countercultural because there's a whole cottage industry out there around writing board bios. I just don't find them very valuable. They leave me with more questions than answers. And so I would just suggest that whether you have one or not, you have a very good CV ready to send out alongside it, and that your LinkedIn is very much up to date and contains sufficient detail for someone like me, who's always looking for directors, to understand what you've done, where you've done it, how long you were there, to whom you reported, what you achieved, be as concrete and specific as possible. And don't worry about length. The old days when we were printing resumes and there was a worry about it being a one-pager, we're all scrolling, right? So, if I'm not interested, I'll just scroll faster. Just make it detailed, accurate, and a great portrayal of the real you. To me, that's your board readiness program, is your body of work.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I mean, a board bio is usually placed in maybe the proxy of who you are from that standpoint. I sometimes look at it from a perspective of board assets. What can you bring? Which is really what you've accomplished throughout your career, and maybe slightly put in different ways to share how you could contribute to the board as well. But to Heather's point on LinkedIn, the first place I go as well is LinkedIn, and I can get a lot of information there. So always keep your LinkedIn updated. But to expand beyond, bios and resumes and things like that, of things that are essential to the board journey is really, if someone's coming to me asking about this, I will often ask a question back of, do you have the time to commit to this? Because, there's all the studies in the world that say, public company board members, you have this many hours and you're studying and you're going to meetings now that we're officially maybe post-pandemic, and you're traveling again to these meetings. So one, do you have the time? Because it's not just what's published on the calendar. It's the committee meetings. It's the prep before the committee meetings. It's the unexpected events. One board I'm on, we had a CEO departure in fairly short order. We had a board chair that became ill and someone had to step in. So I always look to, there's a time commitment and then the extra bandwidth in terms of unexpected events. And those are just two personnel events that happen. I haven't talked about M&A, pandemics, and activist shareholders. So make sure that you carve out extra time. There will be emergency calls, weekend meetings, and jockeying in multiple time zones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm being reminded of one of my contacts who's pursuing full-time board work, and she wanted to pursue it, but at her current organization, there were restrictions for certain level of executives to pursue a corporate board role, and she ended up deciding it was time just to move on from that organization. But she still had another probably 12 months there, and had to get the permission of the CEO. So is there sometimes a conflict with organizations? Certainly in the same industry, there would be a conflict, which might be what you're suited for. So that's awkward. Obviously, that could be a conflict. But does that typically happen? Could any of you comment?
I mean, I can add some, and I'm sure all of us have seen this. Certainly, there's often a conflict with a sitting executive that maybe there's a restriction. Maybe they can't be on any for-profit boards. Maybe it's one that they can be an independent director on one other board. And obviously industry conflicts and things like that are different issues. But it is certainly, if you are in an operation role, make sure that there are no conflicts on that end, as well as you start to pursue this. When I was in an operating role and before I became a member of my company's board, though, I did join an industry board, which was a nonprofit board, as a way to start to get board experience. And so what I often share with others that might not be able to be an independent director at another board is that even on nonprofit boards, get involved in some of the committee work, because it will prepare you for the committee work on other boards as well. And I love the audit committee because you see the financials and you learn a lot through that lens.
I'll add, be selective about which of those nonprofits you consider taking a board seat with. They're generally, all volunteer positions. And so they will be consuming your time, which may then preclude you from taking the ultimate board seat when it comes along. So be careful about that. But certainly choose nonprofits that generate revenue, that have a strong committee structure that aligns very much with what a corporate structure would be. Too often we find ourselves in volunteer positions where it's about community and networking. It's not about running a business. So choose a nonprofit that operates itself like a business, and then that skill will absolutely parlay its way into your first corporate board role. But you have to be selective. There's lots of different flavors of nonprofits. So just be selective about the ones you choose.
And I would also offer on a nonprofit side, also something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I do think one thing I noticed with that one friend of mine at Contact, she was on some big national nonprofits. So that was part of her strategy with that restriction, because those, to your point, Suzanne, are really, it's much different than a smaller local community nonprofit board, right?
Exactly.
Another, I guess, kind of final closing question. Before we get to the Q&A, what are some of the challenges people face that no one's talking about, maybe some specifically for women, or, how can we manage some of the obstacles or challenges to getting on a board?
I think the key point here is that we use the term journey, and it really is. It takes time. Boards have slow turnover, and so finding the right board takes a lot of conversations. Sometimes it takes that maybe you were the number two, but for some reason, something going on at the company, another person was chosen over you. But I say that at that time. So stay in contact with some of the boards that you've had conversations with. Continue to watch what they're doing. Usually you've made it so far for a reason, and maybe there was just one thing that they needed more that somebody else had. And I share that from personal experience. One board, I talked to them for over 3 years. I followed them, watched what they were doing, and the time was right for me to join, for both of us as well. So it is a two-way street, and the conversations that you have sometimes will lead to something a couple years down the road.
Heather, how about you? Or Suzanne?
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh my gosh, Sally, so true. You echoed so many of the bullet points I had written down. Keep being exceptional at your day job. Take advantage of any board leads, however, distant they feel or vague they seem. Follow them up. You just don't know where they might lead. Don't get frustrated when they don't come to fruition. Chances are it wasn't about you, but about circumstances beyond your control. Chances are you won't even know what it was, which can be, it can be tough on any human, but especially on, I think, women who maybe hesitate more than men to put themselves out there in the first instance and take things personally. It's our nature. It's a wonderful part of our nature, but this is just a game of patience and, frankly, a no small element of luck. I know that sounds so, so airy-fairy, but right place, right time, right conversation. Point being, keep having those conversations. Only a small mention, Suzanne said this right at the beginning, and it's so true. Just a small mention to people in your professional network of your interest in expanding your horizons into board service is all it needs to be. You don't need to bang on or make yourself a nuisance. But you'd hate to hear, oh, I wish I'd known you were interested. I was just speaking with so-and-so. The notion of it coming through legal counsel is bang on. Particularly smaller boards often ask their outside counsel for recommendations. Likewise, they ask their investment bankers. So if you have connections into those two networks, absolutely take advantage of them. The other thing I really want to underline in triplicate is that the private equity and venture capital world is opening up like nobody's business to independent directors. It has really been an old boys network world, young boy network. And there are all sorts of new pressures from LPs, frankly, on venture capital firms and private equity firms to start adding truly independent directors to their portfolio company boards and to making them diverse, both in skill set and demographically diverse, if you will. So it's a wonderful time to be a woman with connections into the private equity world in particular.
I sit on a private equity board. I'm their first independent director, and I will tell you, it is so much fun. I will admit it's more fun than being on a public company board. We're more strategic. We have a nice long-term view. We think about things that are going to happen in 5 years, and we plan for that, as opposed to quarter over quarter doing our earnings. And so absolutely be open-minded about the kinds of organizations you might want to serve. Sometimes people think of it as a pathway. First, I'll do a nonprofit, and then I'll get into a private company or a family-owned, and then eventually I'm going to be on a public company board. Being on public company boards, I can tell you, is fraught with many challenges. It can be very limiting. Again, very much about regulatory issues and your quarterly reportings and so on. I think you can do so much more strategically in a PE-backed firm. So be thinking about that, but they don't publicize generally their open board positions. So all the way back to the point here, you'll hear potentially about an open slate for a publicly traded company, but you won't hear about it for a PE-backed company. So it's all about having planted those seeds. There are so few board seats that open, and even just 270 of us that had registered for today's event, there's so many people out there today like yourselves that are interested in these board seats, and the pool of positions is very small. So don't be frustrated when you don't get a lot of callbacks or interest. I think the point was said by Heather, it's not you generally, it's about the company and where they are in their circumstance, but you have to be vigilant and keep at it. And keep networking and letting people know that you're there and that you're ready. Your credentials have to be absolutely crisp. If your board resume doesn't match your LinkedIn page, you're gonna look a little bit squirrely, and that moment when you have that chance to shine is going to be squandered. So be as buttoned up as you can, be articulate as you can, network as much as you can. And if it's meant to be, it will come to you. But people can't just guess and know that that might be something you're interested in. You have to promote. And that's something, as women, we are very terrible at doing. But you must get out there and promote your brand.
Those were, great points. I know we have a bunch of questions we still want to ask, but I really want to go to the audience here. We've had a couple, I have a few I've uncovered, and two recent ones here. About what would be your guidance to help women of color break into boards? I know there's a lot of focus on trying to get more diversity in that regard beyond gender, but also race, ethnicity. Maybe Heather, I know Heather, you focus specifically on women and people.
Yeah. Traditionally underrepresented populations, if you will. There are a lot of affinity groups for aspiring Black corporate directors, Asian corporate directors, Latino corporate directors. They're pretty easy to find, but I can help afterwards put some links or give some links to Nancy and Barbara. Those are great ways to network from others who have found their way, found their path into the boardroom. As a search firm, we would never put anyone forward because they were a certain color or a certain gender. We're all about the skills and experiences. We wouldn't want to set anyone up for disappointment, either in themselves or in the organization. So, I say that because if you feel you're being recruited only for your gender or only for your color, I would ask a lot of follow-up questions about what they really need. And if there really is a voice that you can bring to that boardroom and a contribution you can make beyond your, skirt or whatever it is, that's a big warning sign for me.
I will second that. And I'm going to put into chat a group called Take Your Seat. It's one of those affinity groups. It helps place Black corporate directors into board seats, but it is all about the skill set. And my advice to any of you that are packaging yourselves up, that are people of color, it is about your unique value proposition. What is it that you bring to the board that is going to fill that skills matrix? You don't want to be the token Black person that comes on the board. You don't want to be there, even for those of us that are women, you don't want to be the token woman if that's what they're looking for. You want to fill a specific gap that they have. Yes, you want to be that board generalist, but you want to shine by bringing those skills forward. And that's where your focus should be. It should not necessarily be on gender, race, ethnicity. It should be on your unique skill set.
We'll add, go ahead, Sally.
I was going to add to join some of these groups, whether they're virtual groups or in person, to really build your network. As we've shared throughout the past session, that oftentimes your network is going to evolve. When I went on this journey myself, my network has really evolved from, when I was running a company to what it is today. I sit 6 years out from that, and my network is much different today. So part of it is being intentional to build this network. And oftentimes I got it from, not only did I join these groups to build my network in a different way, but I also had the added bonus of really learning a lot from them as well. So these groups put on webinars of timely topics for board directors as well. So you're building your network, and then you're also building your skills as a director. So it's got a twofold component to it.
We had another question earlier. For those of us who were executive operators and now run our own advisory firms, would you have any guidance for us to stand out?
Yeah, and then someone else who is in the same role said, and does that make us less compelling as board candidates?
That can cut both ways in my experience. We definitely have board clients who are looking for sitting operating executives. That's typically because all of their directors have retired, and they're looking around the room and saying, man, we're a little out of date with respect to operations. That's very specific to that particular company's situation. But in that case, somebody who's also out of an operating role, be it in an advisory role with their own advisory business, or, we've got this new term, a portfolio career, that people seem to be adopting that expression, and other specs specifically talk to people who are not in an active operating role because they want people who can spend more time. We've got a situation right now where we're recruiting for an audit chair, and they are replacing the current audit chair because he's a sitting public company CFO and he's just really stretched and too busy. So they want a retiree. So it's so circumstantial. It's back to that serendipity thing. The need for one type of executive is different from one to the next. However, I would say that in an advisory business, use your context. If you're out there working with clients, looking for future clients, those sorts of contacts can turn into board roles. I know a lot of people who are retiring and going into, well, if you will, stepping back from their executive careers and going into sort of senior advisory roles, again, at PE firms. And that's giving them exposure to interesting portfolio companies that can benefit from their skills. And they are often then appointed to the boards of those portfolio companies to contribute in a deeper way.
I'll add to it that this is where some nonprofit work might actually help. There was an earlier question about, I've been 6 years out of the corporate world. Does that make me less attractive? And the answer is, yeah, it does. If you're not actively in the boardroom talking about current issues, and issues move very quickly, right? ESG became a thing 2 years ago, and it's a very different thing today than it was 2 years ago. And if you're not actively in there studying it, understanding it, dealing with it on a regular basis, your skills become stale. And so if you find that you're out of that role, stepping into a nonprofit that, again, is a strong nonprofit, generates some revenue, has some committees, it will sort of bolster the gap that you have then in your career.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. I think that current operating room and knowing, as Heather said too, we looked around, everyone was retired, and just getting that current view could be really important. The first question we had was, I represent lots of small nonprofits and local government boards, and the hustle on these boards members is impressive. How can these experienced board members make the leap to a larger platform like the ones you're describing? And on the other side, are these larger boards looking at recruiting from these smaller organizations, or are they valuing the work that they're doing on these organizations?
I'll jump in. I think it's a bit of a leap. I don't think that and I'll defer back to Heather on this one because she's got the recruiting point of view. I don't think that you are recruiting for a larger organization and you purposefully look to a smaller organization for your talent. That generally isn't the pathway. However, I think that if you can, again, pull the skill sets forward and the skill set aligns with these larger organizations and what they're seeking, then I think that you may have a fit. But it's definitely a challenge to make that leap from nonprofit into larger or mid-sized corporate work. And that is all based on, again, your network, the skills that you've been able to articulate, and getting out there in the market and showing your interest in that particular realm. Heather, I will ask you to please add.
I was really scratching my head there, so thank you for buying some time for me. And I definitely agree with with your assessment, Suzanne. I would say that one place I see it happening is with tech expertise. Maybe a tech need or skill is very acute. Maybe a go-to-market skill that typically is around digital marketing or customer, the digital journey it takes to become maybe a customer-centered organization. That's typically where we see the skills trumping, if you will, the kind of organizations that they've come from. Maybe just a couple things about nonprofits or industry boards. My advice to you is please don't oversell them on your resumes or in your LinkedIn. Don't put them first. It's unless they really are what defines you. That's different. Then it's completely legit to put them first. But if most of you are still working in some sort of an operating role, put that first. That's your main thing, right? And put your nonprofit board service where it belongs, if you will, on your resume. I so often see LinkedIn titles that say board member, blah, 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 blah. And then, you read it and you're like, no, that's not the headline. I'm exaggerating a little, but I hope I'm able to make the point. But the other thing is I do hear people serving on nonprofit are rubbing elbows, getting to know people in the corporate world who also serve on those nonprofit boards who can be helpful. And so, again, not a reason to join a nonprofit. I think Nancy said it best, join it because you're passionate about the cause and believe you can make a difference. But do look around the room and see where your fellow board members serve elsewhere and might have an intro to make.
That's a great answer because I will say I joined my local chapter of NACD's board about a year and a half, going on 2 years ago now. And at first, the value of that activity wasn't evident to me, but very quickly it became a networking opportunity. And I could certainly do this as a member as well, but getting in the trenches and working with my peers on the board on particular topics that are important to us has forged relationships that I would never have had the benefit of having otherwise. And so it absolutely is a networking opportunity. And these are people that also influence board seats. So if you're there with them and they know that you're interested in certain types of organizations, then it opens that aperture. It's just another step to networking that can get you closer to the pin.
So true.
I think throughout all of this, it's really when the question was asked, do these places look to these nonprofit boards or smaller boards to recruit from? I think it's the opposite of that. You have to stay out there and network and get involved in other types of organizations or talk to lawyers, talk to investment bankers, talk to auditors. They all have a unique perspective of what's going on with the company and in the boardroom. So don't wait around for the phone to ring. You have to be very proactive in this journey.
It's a great way to leave this conversation. Our focus was really to bring some experts to give you a lot of nuggets, a lot of strategies, a lot of things to take away to help you continue to pursue your board journey. So I really want to thank Sally and Suzanne and Heather. You've offered such great value. Thank you for joining us today.